Well, hey, welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. Robert here with Brandon Grant and Pete Goodman.
Doctor
Pete
Pete
Goodman.
Okay.
Man, look at him.
He's the only one on the staff that has that title, so we need to. He always tells us we have to call him that.
He asks me all the time. He goes, "Call me Dr. Pete for now on." Even just
me too. I go in his office.
Yes.
He's like, "Hey Pete." He's like, Dr. Goodman.
Dr. Goodman.
I really want his emperor, but I'm settling for doctor.
Well, that is very humble of you. Very generous
It's like
and
Jesus
gracious.
said to take the lowest seat.
Emperor.
Emperor.
Wow.
Well, it's better because last time we had this conversation, it was dictator. So,
Well, emperor's just a nicer way of saying it.
So when I walk out of his office, I'm like, Dr. Hitler.
Oh, man. That took a turn.
Quick, jeez.
Wow. Well, let's talk about Walking in Big Sky because you wrapped up the series this past
I don't know where you're going to go with this
weekend.
one now after that comment. Sorry. I apologize.
Well, actually, what I'm going to talk about is actually what it actually looks like to be a pastor. What does a pastor actually do? Because you kind of made, a joke in there, but you kind of went through all the different finances and everything and what it looks like here at Rice City Church, the financial picture of it all. And you kind of mentioned and you said, so I know that there can be this paradigm that pastors just sit around and read and then preach on Sundays and that's all they kind of do. But really there's multiple millions of dollars that we're actually responsible for and stewarding and things like that. But I wanted to kind of give people a sneak peek, if you will, behind the curtain or whatever they call it. I don't know. But really, what does it look like? What is all included in being a pastor? And we all have different hats and roles and responsibilities that we hold here at the church. But what are some of the other elements and responsibilities and dynamics that come from being a pastor?
I mean, I think that's probably, I can speak to our context.
Yeah.
Every pastor probably is different.
It is.
So
true.
There's definitely the preaching, the teaching. There's the predicting of what's to come and planning for that.
Strategy of it all.
There's trying to connect with staff. There's trying to equip people, inspire people. There's counseling people. Yeah. There's looking at financial numbers and wondering what we can do, what we can't do. There's trying to, we were having a conversation right before we started the camera, we are in partnership with other churches.
Yes.
How do we support other church plants, and whether that be what time we can give or what money we can give. I oftentimes will try to meet with people in the community and try to just kind of keep good rapport.
Yeah.
With different people so that they know that the church is there if they need us to respond. I mean, it looks similar, but it varies too, week to week.
It's so different all the time. Yeah, it's very fluid.
So, I mean, I would just describe it. It's, to me, being a pastor is, it's an oxymoron. It's like this thing that brings you great joy, but it feels like a 100-pound gorilla on you all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Pete, what would you say? What are some other things that you think are dynamics or
I spend 98% of my time making sure our youth ministry doesn't cause us massive insurance problems. No,
they still
true.
do.
That's
Okay.
you're not doing your job very well.
Yes.
You're not doing your job very well.
I mean, it's I never had that perspective of what does a pastor do because I grew up in this kind of.
Yep.
But I do understand someone that has never been a part of seen behind it, that it can look like, what do you guys do all day? In some ways though, we all have different roles and there are parts of a church that are a business. We have staff and we have budgets and we have buildings and things.
Yep.
And then there are the parts that you would expect of when you think about ministry or church, a lot of meals, right? A lot of meals.
Yeah, I mean the food aspect, that's probably the best way to connect with people and one another. So you're definitely, and you're trying to work around people's work schedules, and so lunch is generally about the best time, or breakfast, and so
it's hard to be on a diet.
Yeah,
pastor.
it really is. It really is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote kind of a list of things that pastors have in their every day, but counseling, event planning, event coordinating, leadership, discipleship, strategy, training, writing sometimes, especially for you, Pete, financial, advising for people, parenting, advising as well, and counseling, marriage counseling. I mean, the list could probably keep going on, but there's a lot that
Sure.
we're privileged and honored to get to be part of, and in that way. So just wanted to kind of give people, just kind of made that small little remark during the message to kind of expand that a little bit more, just in case I imagine there's a lot of people that are curious. Like, I get that question all the time. So what do you do? What does your typical day look like?
Yeah.
And so, and it's usually one of those things where it's like, it's different every day.
Yeah.
But it's always full and it's exciting.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the greatest advantage of being a pastor is I never struggle with wondering if what I do has meaning or significance. And I know there's a lot of people that
Absolutely.
that's the one thing that they wish they had in their jobs more. And so I think that's such a huge blessing to feel like there's definitely significance in each and everything that we do.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So you kind of gave, speaking of meaning and significance, you gave a bunch of reports or celebrations of all that God has done in and through Rice City Church in this past year in 2023. And so as you kind of celebrated all those things, when you were like kind of writing out that list or even talking through some of those things, was there any specific moments that just popped out for you or that you think back on and you're like, man, thank you, Jesus. It was just such a fulfilling moment and such an exciting time where you just saw God move.
Yeah.
Was there any moments like that for either of you guys in 2023 where you're thanking God a little extra for those moments?
I got one that comes to mind, but I'll let you go first if you got one.
I mean, I don't want to separate like overly from personal, but personal. When I took my kids to build a house, that was really impacting. But to be honest, and this is like the third one actually. I did three. The third one, when the hurricane came, was for some reason just the thing that stuck with me the most.
The hurricane.
Well, the
rainstorm. Yeah, the rainstorm of San Diego.
The people that are listening know what I'm talking about. I just felt such a sense of this is what we're supposed to be doing. As a, not like I mean, like in the sense that the church is meant to bring hope and healing, and being with these other Christians and people from our church and people from even the YWAM base in Tijuana, and just racing to finish this house for this family with little kids that needed shelter that day from a storm coming.
I thought it was so awesome.
Yeah. And that sort of knowing that wasn't, that was the 14th or 15th house we'd built. And it was just like, I'm just grateful that we get to do this. I'm grateful that, to be a part of a community that's willing to give and to serve and to do things that have real lasting impact.
Yeah.
It was just, I don't know. There's something about swinging a hammer, and just tying it back a little bit. You ask, what does a pastor do all day?
Yeah.
I was in contract labor for a good portion of my life, even while doing ministry. So there's always this dynamic of like, when you're a painter or like a house painter, you finish painting the room, you look around, you're like, I painted a room today, and you leave. When you're in this, it's like, what? I know I did things today, but they don't have the concrete. And so getting a chance to just go and like swing a hammer and build it, like that house exists now because we built it.
It's huge.
I love being a part of those things. So it was really cool.
And for context, if you're listening, Pete actually led a team down to Mexico that weekend when Hurricane Hillary was tearing through Mexico.
Yeah, my son came and he brought a couple of his soccer friends and their dads, and it was cool. It was just, everyone was so dialed in because, and that was the third build I'd been on, but like this one had the most like, we've got to get this done. Like there's a storm coming. These people need this house. And it was just like, when we were done, it was like, man, that's the kingdom of God is bringing hope and healing to a family right now.
That's so awesome.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
How about you, Brandon?
I've shared on this podcast or in church before, but just the night that Jamie and I got to go over from family camp over to the high school camp and watch the way that the high schoolers rallied together, prayed together, and just the Spirit of God fell upon them. And to see what's transcended over the last couple months since that moment of just how many of them are coming, how many of them are a part of Rooted, our discipleship experience. Like there's just like, it was not just this random moment, but it was a very definitive moment and catalytic as well. And so I just loved it being in the distance and just watching, these 27 high schoolers all laying hands on this one student who they were just so relieved to find, because they thought that he was gone and didn't know where he was at. But just the way that they prayed together, and that really galvanized them. So That stuck with me because it gave me hope, not just for that moment and those students, but also just in general, as far as like how much the next generation, if they come together and they find their hope in Christ, like it's going to be pretty significant for the church at large.
Be powerful.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of goes into my celebration where I've been thanking the Lord. I was even last night watching as the cars were driving in Sunday night, just into the parking lot. And I watched them. There's like almost like wrecks because there's so many cars coming in at the same time for all these people in our church that are going through Rooted, which is our discipleship experience. And a bunch of them are youth. I remember at one point I was like, what door did you even come in? Because they just came from behind me. They came through a side door or something. But there's all kinds of youth there as well that are just going through a discipleship experience. But man, I've been thanking Jesus so much to see people dedicating 10 weeks to become a more committed disciple of Jesus Christ, because I love that people come to church on Sundays and I know that God's working through that in a big way. I really get excited when I see people saying, you know what, I'm going to commit my life to Jesus. And it's not just going to be something I attend. It's going to be something that I engage in and actually start to sacrifice for and prioritize above everything else. Because when I believe that when that starts to happen in the body of Christ, that things really start to become catalytic. It's a great word. It really starts to become a momentous movement of hope and healing into the name of Jesus.
You know, Robert likes momentum and movement and catalytic things. Did you know
catching
that?
me off guard.
This is so.
Here's
this
the
is
thing, though.
so.
He also refers to breakfast as brekkie. Brekkie.
Yeah.
And I questioned whether I could still
saw
be
that
friends with
text
you.
this
Brekkie
morning.
with my bestie Ben. Okay, Ben is shout out to Ben Kafer and Katie Kafer, who are working on delivering.
Ben is not working on anything. Ben is waiting for his wife to deliver two twin baby boys.
Prayerfully doting on his bride,
Yes.
and soon, well, actually, present mother of his.
But
children.
that is why this is a one-angled shot and a little bit different of a viewing experience.
That's exactly
for digging
right.
deeper today. I just recognize like we're getting profiles the whole time.
I mean,
I'm looking at you. And
this is bare bones. I mean, this is probably one of the most difficult moments of 2023 for us.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, not having multiple camera shots here, but
Suffering.
Real persecution and suffering right here.
But speaking of which, you know, we talked about some of those memorable like things that we really are celebrating about. But the truth is, it's not all sunshine and daisies all the time. Like, you know, Rice City Church and trying to lead and pastor and those things. What are some of the most difficult or challenging moments? I know with some discretion, because sometimes those are personal moments as well. But what are some of the things that kind of has created those heaviness, those 1,000-pound gorillas and things that you're talking about, where you're just kind of like, Lord, oh man, like I need you to not just sustain the situation or these people, but also me in this circumstance.
I mean, a lot of them are people related.
Yeah.
Right. Where the people you love, something happens to them, whether it's life happens and you're just sad for unfortunate events, or they themselves have made a decision that bring about a lot of unfortunate events, and that's heartbreaking. You know, anytime you're working with marriages that are on the rocks, parents dealing with kids that are just obstinate and doing their own thing and going their own way. You know, just even yesterday at the Welcome Center, talking with a mother that her heart is just broken because her daughter wants nothing to do with the faith that she tried to instill in her. And everything just shifted in this young girl's life. And so to hear that's heavy. Yeah. That's hard. You know, so those are parts of it. And then, you know, I shared a lot yesterday, just I carry this. I don't know if everybody does, but the financial weight of what comes in, how things are spent, are people taken care of, what we can do, what we can't do, like that. That to me at times is a huge weight. And then just, you know, like I'm human. Like I didn't mention this a whole lot yesterday, but like it's hard not in those moments to like you quickly have to guard your heart from sizing people up. Like when you're struggling potentially financially, and you're like, I don't want to drive through the parking lot and see what cars are here today. I don't want to see what cups of coffee people are carrying today. You know, like, and that's and people probably size me up too. You know, like, oh,
I sure do.
Good. I mean, like, I'm just saying, like, when financial pieces become something that you're considering, the enemy makes it a way. I think makes a way into your life to try to like start wondering what could be, why it isn't, casting judgment, and so I fight those things in my own heart that sometimes creates a different weight in me that I don't like. But I see it, and my wife and I fight it. Same thing when you're counseling somebody, right? And they've made a decision that you're like, what?
Yeah,
what were you thinking?
You're
Like,
oh my God.
gosh, we've talked about this, or you know this. Like, and there's those moments that you just want to like not have a lot of grace and mercy as much as you just want to like, but
Yes.
so those are hard. Those are just real aspects of leading and loving and pastoring, and then knowing that there's probably people looking at me at times of the decisions I make or words that I say, and thinking the same types of thoughts in my own direction. So
I think it's real. I mean, for me, it's definitely, I think immediately to a lot of those people that I just love, that I've been trying to pour into and point them to Jesus, and still watching, some decisions being made, or even just the aftermath of poor decisions happening and things like that. And just my heart breaks. Those are the late nights praying for them, and sometimes like mourning over even, and things like that. I think also, if you don't know this about me, I'm a little bit of a dreamer. So even
what
did you know?
This is the most groundbreaking podcast I've ever been on. Like,
I can be a little bit of a dreamer.
Randall. I have Randall in my head from the conversation previous. Robert is just exposing things about himself.
I'm
we
just
had no idea.
My whole life is a lie.
You all know.
You're a dreamer.
But with being a dreamer, sometimes it's hard to know. Like, man, I want to go on it. Let's go. And then there's like a lot of times just in organizational ministry and a lot of people and a lot of movement that's heading in one direction where it's like, you need to wait, Robert. And so sometimes that's hard for me, to wait, to be patient, to wait on the Lord, but also wait on others, right? And
wait on me.
Sometimes wait on you.
You just call it like it is, dude.
Not always, not just you, but and so wow, that's not where I was going.
But I know that's what you were thinking.
Like a small part. No, but and so some of those things can be hard and kind of create wrestling in me as well.
Yeah.
And so that's been a challenging, difficult thing that's made me lean on Jesus and count him faithful, and also just be like, okay, I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
Even if I can't see the timing, if I can't see, what the journey ahead looks like, I'm going to be journey minded by being present in the place that I'm at on the trail or the road or whatever illustration you want to use.
Trail's good. Walking in big
Trail.
sky.
There you go.
Yeah.
But be present where I'm at, not necessarily at the peak that's ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing that I'm learning, but it's also a very difficult thing to learn and grow through as well. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Deep. Dr. Goodman.
Dr. Goodman bringing just the depth.
I think, no, to be honest, I'm the exact opposite. We know that. We've talked about it a lot. Like we're so different.
Yeah.
My biggest struggle is not dreaming enough. My biggest struggle is getting too content and just comfortable. And this year has been a big like, God push me. God, like, don't let me settle. Don't let me get comfortable. Don't let me treat this as just a job. That's oftentimes my the default vice of my life is to get into a rhythm and just be like, oh, I'm just doing a job. It's like, no, we're advancing the kingdom of God here. You're not just doing a job. And so to keep dreaming, I think that's one reason why you and I connect well.
Yeah.
Is because I really, like, I feed off sometimes and need like that part of you that wants to just keep going and dreaming and dreaming. Like, yes, I need to dream more. And
then I benefit from sometimes you saying, let's just
and then Brandon's
do
in the
this
middle,
today.
just being forces pushed on both sides.
Mr. Well-rounded. Yes, you are. That's good. Well, you started to talk about funding, and that's what you talked about yesterday during the sermon as well. We kind of talked about this idea of like this tension of not wanting to size people up or try to figure out like how can you make this happen and things like that. I feel like when it comes to fiduciary responsibility and with money in general, there is this tension that is held when it's in the name of Jesus. And it's this tension of both balancing between an over focus on money. I think that we can become so focused on finances and money and budgets and funding, and we can become professional fundraisers, and all we do is talk about it and think about it and kind of move things around all the time. But then there's the other side of it where you can just be straight up neglectful and negligent about it and just not pay any attention to it at all, and then be irresponsible, a bad steward, which is also wicked according to the scriptures. And so how do you hold that tension of not letting mammon or money become a idol or something that you put an over focus on in an organizational, in a truly a nonprofit business is part of what the church is as well, but at the same time not be negligent? Like, where do you find that balance with those two things?
For me, generosity.
Personally, or
Both.
explain that.
I mean, a part of starting a church, and leading a church is like the financial portfolio of Rise City Church mirrors the way that I handle my own personal money. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're very similar in terms of like, of how things would be allocated. So, and, so for me to not rely fully on Mammon and feel like I want more, it's giving a lot away. And that giving a lot away to some can see you to be negligent, but I just see it as I'm trying to trust the Lord more in this, because if I hoard a lot of this and keep this, I'm going to keep wanting to do more, get more, have more, see the nest egg be bigger. And so, so for me, that is one of the realms of kind of managing that tension, is to keep leaning into greater levels of generosity progressively over time. And trying to, as the scriptures talk about, like, establish your enough, right? Like to not have too much, but not have too little, but what's enough for this moment. And so, Jamie and I asked that question. The elders and I at times have asked that question, like, what is enough for Rise City Church? What's enough for the Grant household? Like, and, and you can't project your enough on a personal level to somebody else, because there's different establishments of enough, like what one needs. But knowing that helps us create boundaries of what we invest in, what we save, what we give, and things like that, because we've kind of talked about it in advance. And so it helps us know, I think I've used this example before, what is enough in terms of a car, right? And for us, we've resolved that we, God willing, will never have a car payment. We want to pay cash for a car. So for us, we're probably the highest enough is if someday we're able to buy a $25,000 car in cash. That we haven't been able to do that yet, but we pay cash for things that's probably our enough, and we're okay with that, And so other people might say, no, I want to do this. I can't control that in other people, but I think that is one of the ways I go about trying to manage that tension, is creating budgets, having conversations, and then also constantly trying to push the realms of generosity as much as I can.
Okay.
So
unpack a little bit about how, because you mentioned you utilize generosity in your own personal life as well as a church to kind of combat this over focus on money or holding it too high and things like that. How does generosity at a heart level change the way that we view money? And I mean, obviously it's a leading question, but I want to give you a moment to kind of pastor us a little bit through that, because I think there's probably people listening to this right now that are dealing with a little bit of, maybe not full on, but maybe seeds of greed, or even seeds of just wanting to find their security and having a nest egg, to use your own word. How does generosity change us on a heart level when it comes to our perspective on money?
Well, I mean, Jesus said, be on guard against various types of greed, right? So greed takes on many different forms and facets in people's life. And sometimes greed can be found in having a lot of abundance of possessions. And sometimes it can be found not having much possessions, but having a huge amount of savings, but there's not been the willingness to open up your hands and be generous with that, right?
Yeah.
And there's different levels in there as well. So I think what it's done in my own heart is, one, there is nothing that has proven to me the trustworthiness of God's promises and the reliability of his word than this notion of trust me in this, test me in this, and give, and watch what I do. And so I feel like I've experienced God in greater ways the more generous I've been, and what it's done in my own heart to say, this isn't in my control, I put it in yours, and the way he's at times provided back, and it just gives me greater than definitive confidence in what the scriptures say. And that then makes my heart more vibrant in his direction. And so I think that there's that piece to it, but you don't know that until you do it and you experience it.
That's right.
And there's also just pieces sometimes where it's just I really have to know in my theology, the only thing that lasts past this life is people. And so how do I invest in that direction in people? Yep. And And that's hard because I like stuff, like I'm not against those types of things. And people would look at my life and be like, well, you have stuff. And it's like, I know, but I would say that part of the stuff I have is like, it's coming by way of trying to like say, Lord, here, I'm testing you this, being faithful what you said to do this. And then you've been gracious to bless back. And so we continue that. And I just think that it's kind of like, as you have this like free flowing mindset and your hands are more open, you kind of experience the wind of the Spirit moving and those different things. Like,
Yeah.
so like, let me give you an example. And this is probably one thing. So like we have regular giving, right? Like we have a committed amount that we give. And then we also say, okay, there's spontaneous giving to whatever else too. So we had an appliance in our house that went out. And
Your microwave.
yeah, I'm trying not to say what it was because then it's going to give away something. But
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm not going to tell a story at this point.
Oh no!
I just can't. I can't.
Okay.
I can't. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to blow it with my microwave
No,
statement.
no.
but
It's fine. It's
You
fine.
just nuked the whole story.
I
did.
did. Just
Nuked
totally
it.
nuked it. I was trying to like
Oh.
because there was someone who was generous in our direction
Cool.
because of being able to helping us fix it. And so, but we weren't like comfortable really having someone else help in that regard, but they wanted to bless. So we said, if you do this, then this amount of money is what we're also then going to give away to people. And so we've taken that because they said, hey, we love to do this. And now we've said over the last, 2 months, we're just finding different people to like, anonymously bless and just kind of, they don't know that.
Oh man.
So I'm just saying but those are things where it's like, you just kind of try to move in the wind of the Spirit. You receive people's gracious generosity.
That's
you
right.
are a bestower of that. And you start to see like this kind of openness and this flow. There's not a stopgap or a clog. And you're like, this is how the Lord wants you to work. And your heart is then free in those things to like be more generous. And to receive
picture.
generosity from other people.
That's right. To be open-handed, both to receive from the Lord through others, or even just from Him, and then also give freely. Right?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
How about you, Pete?
I
mean-
one thing I was thinking is right off the beginning, you said our fiduciary responsibility, and it just reminded me that at the root of that word is the word faith, fides. Like to have a fiduciary responsibility is to be faithful with what you've been given, and I guess I would speak firstly, at least from the perspective of working at a church. I appreciate you guys and the people that I work with because it hasn't always been the case at previous places that maybe I've been employed or worked, where I felt that the people leading the church were being completely faithful. I want to be careful because I don't mean dishonest. There's a difference between dishonest and not fully faithful.
Yeah.
Because dishonest is a whole different issue. If you're being dishonest with money, it's black and white.
That's a different conversation.
Faithfulness isn't quite black and white. It's more subjective. And what does it mean to be faithful? And this is where I land. There's a great analogy a philosopher gave about finding proper ways to make laws, and I adopt it with my kids, and it's basically this: if your kids are going to share something like a cookie, the person who cuts the cookie in half doesn't get to pick which piece they want, and so the person who's not cutting it gets to pick. And essentially, what that means is, if I know that you're picking the side of the cookie that you want, I'm going to make sure it's perfectly. At the root of that is essentially do unto others, right?
Yeah.
And so I constantly think to myself, if I weren't on staff, if I weren't working at a church, and I were just a person that called Rise City home and faithfully gave money to the church, how would I feel about how you just spent that money? Now, there's some times that I wouldn't have all the information. Maybe I don't completely agree with you or whatever, but do I find that to be an unfaithful use of money? And if I can't, in my mind, come to a place of saying, I think the average giver at Rise City would find this to be reasonable, then I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to do that. And it really is I want to spend money here at Rise the way that I would want others to spend if I wasn't on staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, that's the most faithful way I can do it. And again, we're not always going to agree. Someone might say, I don't like that you bought that TV or that screen, or I wouldn't have done that or whatever. Or I do wish you had nicer air conditioners or whatever. but at least we're trying. At least that's our target of like, we're trying to be faithful, that we're being reasonable, and we're spending the money the way that we can all at least try to agree is faithful to it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I find the most peace, is if I can sleep at night knowing if I were looking in, I would be okay with this.
That's good.
So, but I've also, this before, that comes from a lot of wounds and a lot of hurt, a lot of anger at church for not feeling that way, for being like, you spent how much on what?
Mm-hmm.
Because, going back to what we talked at the beginning, like, there's a part of church, when I say it's like a business, I would actually say that in many ways, church, the business side of church actually feels more like a government. Like, cause there's this, like, it's not really your own money. Like we,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
if you run a business, this is your money. This is your thing. This isn't really any of our things.
Yeah.
We're managing this for God.
That's right.
Where that's kind of like when you're an elected official in government, it's like, it's not my country. I'm just sort of managing it. It's your taxes, right? There's something like that similarly at church. And so the worst feeling
clarifying.
you have is when your government officials aren't faithful with your taxes, or aren't managing your city the way that you think it should be managed. And so for us to step into this role and say, God has called us as his servants to manage this well, I take that very seriously. And I, I don't know. I think I like working here, because I found over the last 10 years, a lot of peace and healing from past wounds that I didn't feel things were managed well. So
it's helpful.
Yeah.
I also make rules for my kids based on ancient philosophers, by the way.
Actually, he's not ancient. He's still alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
So-
I was about ready to make a comment when he's like, of course a philosopher. I was like, but that's
Yeah, of course a philosopher.
Yeah.
But it's
It wasn't
true.
a Christian philosopher, right? Yeah, it was-
Either way.
yeah.
how much
But-
time are we at?
I
Do we
don't
have a
know.
clock?
About a half hour.
Well,
Half
yeah,
hour?
about half
Okay,
an hour.
cool.
So
I'll
let's
keep going.
let's
That's
kind
good.
of let's kind of close up with this. We talked about the idea of holding the tension of how we value money, neglect versus over focus. But how about how we trust God for provision, or even how we make sure that things are provided for, that we have money coming in, that we can make sure that we can continue operating at the best that we can to continue to advance the kingdom of God, continue to help people get to know Jesus and so forth. How do you balance the tension between just trusting God to provide and also having responsibility to actually exhort Christians to be generous themselves, to give to the work of the Lord, to also us ourselves be faithful in our giving and our generosity as well, and then with the funds that are there? How do you hold the tension? Because I know that even in people's personal lives, some people will say, I'm just trusting the Lord to provide for this thing that they need. But they could go and get a job, right? Or they
Just
could,
waiting on the Lord for that CEO position.
you know what I'm talking about, right? They could actually do certain things that are actually maybe like responsible, or even good stewardship, or obedient and things like that. But sometimes I think that Christians, and I've seen it happen before, maybe not just Christians, will kind of swing to the other side and be like, I'm just going to wait on the Lord. And it's like, well, maybe while you're waiting, there's some things that you could be doing. How do you hold that tension as an organization, as a church, as a ministry?
That always makes me think of that scene in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation where Cousin Eddie is
Philosopher,
outside.
National Lampoon.
He's
Okay.
outside in his underwear and like this floppy hat, drinking a beer, and he's talking to his wife. And he's like, "So, has Eddie found a job yet?" No, he's holding out for a management position. There's this. It's like there's this side of us. It's
Awesome.
like we can sometimes hold out for God to do something when really He's like, "Why aren't you doing anything yourself?"
Yes.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. What do you think, Brandon?
Well, I mean, I think part of trusting God is exercising responsibility. Right? He's wired the world to work in such a way that this is how you trust in me. This is how I will provide. Right? And there's times that God can miraculously provide manna in the desert, but a lot of the times it's like, were you obedient with what I gave you to begin with? And as you are faithful and diligent, and you, I think, prioritize the way He said to allocate and your spending. That those are ways that you are trusting God, and He then bestows more. I think that, He was faithful with little, is bestowed more, right? Mm-hmm. So like sometimes people are waiting for more, but they weren't faithful with the little they had to begin with. And so he's not going to be like, oh, cool, let me go ahead and give you this next advancement in your job or advancement of pay. It's like if you squandered $1,000, you'll perhaps squander $100,000, right? And
Yeah.
so I just think that they're not mutually exclusive of waiting and trusting and having responsibility and diligence. They all are mixed in the same pot, so to speak. Like, and that is trusting God. And so I'm wired to work. God has made it such a way that I'm supposed to work.
Yes.
That's been around from the very beginning in Genesis. And as I'm faithful with what I have, then I trust that he's giving me what I need for today. That's always assured me is what I have for today and I don't have for tomorrow. That's James chapter 4, right? Like to go boasting about what you're going to do the next day is like, you don't know that. And so, I think that that's a part of the management. It's just like, am I doing what I can do? And I trust God to do the rest. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I know I'm being faithful right now with what I can do. And then
Absolutely.
That's where I see the miracle on the next side when he comes through on different things.
That's so important that obedience and trust go hand in hand. That part of being obedient with what God has given you and with the abilities and even like the hands and the legs and the feet and the mouth that God has given you, that you are being obedient in that to use it to continue to advance towards the things that God's calling you towards and things like that too, while also trusting and waiting on the Lord to provide in those types of ways. It's kind of like, and I'll close with this. I have my Rooted book open right now to some of the reading that we've done this last week and things like that too. But there was one day that talked about this idea of double-fisted faith. And it comes out of Daniel chapter 3, where Nebuchadnezzar is demanding that all the people would bow down and worship the statue of him and things like that. And basically he threatens those faithful and says, if you don't, I'm going to throw you in the furnace. And they respond and they say, you know what, we serve a God who's able to deliver us, and he can deliver us. He will deliver us. They're holding that like fist in the air. Like I have faith that my God will deliver me. Almost like I have faith that my God will provide for me.
Yeah.
I have faith that God will provide for our church, so we don't have to ever lay off staff or cut hours back, or so we don't have to cut ministry, and we can keep on, fighting the good fight and advancing the kingdom and keep on reaching our community and telling people about Jesus so they can find hope and healing in his name. I know God's going to provide. We hold that fist in the air. And then the other fist in Daniel chapter 3, they say, I know God will deliver us. And then they go on right after that and say, but even if he doesn't, this other fist in the air of saying, you know what, I have faith that he will deliver, but even if he doesn't, he's worth being loyal to and having my allegiance completely. And so in the same way, like that's part of like the stewardship thing too, is this double-fisted faith of like, I know God will provide, and this goes on a personal level as well as a church level or a world level. I know God will take care of us, but even if he doesn't, like he's worth following. He's worth giving my entire existence to. He's worth leading everyone I know towards him because he's good and he's faithful. And so you can have that double-fisted faith even when it comes to trusting God with funding and provision and stewardship and all those kinds of things as well. So
it's good. It's a good word. It's a good word.
Anything else you guys want to kind of close with before we end this episode of Digging Deeper, Doctor?
I'm getting hungry. I didn't have brekkie this morning.
Brekkie?
Breaky.
Well, maybe we can have brunch together.
Brunchy?
Brunchy?
Oh my gosh.
No, this is good, man. It was a good conversation. I really enjoyed yesterday's we're recording this on Monday. It was just a good reminder, and I think it was good to keep calling people towards this. So
and I would just, I would add, like, I didn't give a lot of specifics, but we encourage people, like, whether it's trying to figure out your budget and figure out like what is an amount that you can start with, that to begin being faithful to give on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, to do that, whether you're writing a check, whether you're bringing it in cash, or to go online, like. I'm pretty unapologetic in asking in terms of like, because I feel like I want to be sympathetic where people are at financially, but at the same time, like I do believe this is something that frees our heart to experience God more.
It does.
And so encourage people to be generous and try it out. And there's that aspect of, right, kind of strategic giving and just consistent versus sporadic, but then also open yourself up. Who knows? There will be needs that might come upon your path that you didn't have budgeted, and just maybe God brought him upon your path for that moment too, and just see how he works through it.
Guaranteed, if you're looking for those moments, you'll find them all over the place, and you'll be blessed by them when you step into it and become God's hands and feet. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
10-year birthday this coming week.
Woo!
That's what
That was loud.
we got excited about.
I got real excited about that one.
Yeah. So join us this Sunday as we celebrate both at church and in the park. And then I think Ben will be back. I don't know when Ben will be back next week or
I
not.
don't
Probably not.
know.
He's got 2 little boys, so we'll see what Digging Deeper looks like next week. But
Either way.
I just want Ben to come with like one of those like carriers where like both of his twins while he's playing his guitar.
That'd be awesome.
That would be
I
awesome.
don't know if you can do a
Mariah had something. There's so many like cool inventions since I had kids. Like it was like this, so you don't have to like hold your kid on your like hip all the time.
Yeah.
Like it had like a little like seat, so like it just like has a little platform, and so Mariah just hanging there, and the kids right there, and I'm just picturing Ben with boys
Two of
on
them,
both
two of them.
sides. You know,
I hope so.
That'd be awesome.
Look for that in a future episode of Digging Deeper. We'll see you next time.